Sylvia Wynans, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, and I'm excellent. Thank you.
The pleasure is truly mine. Excited to have you on. Excited to dive in deep to your subject area today. But before we do, can you give us a bit of context about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, so my name is Sylvia Wynans, and I am originally from Poland. And right now I live on Mallorca. I've been here for the last 9 years. And here, through kind of unplanned event, I started this path of discovery and really learning about skin's photoprotective system. And it's something I've been studying for the last 6 years.
Amazing. So the path changed a fair bit. What did it change from? What were you doing before you're doing what you do today?
Well, before that, I used to work on yachts for 12 years. So I was traveling a lot and moving from place to place.
Okay. So you were relatively exposed to the sun, so we're starting to get a few hints here and there. But obviously, I think it was the turn of your pregnancy that started to allow you to become a little bit more conscious about what you were putting on your skin, what you were putting into your body. Talk to us a little bit more about that journey.
Yeah, exactly. Just getting pregnant made me really acutely aware of everything that I'm consuming, but not only by ingestion, but also by topical application. So I started really examining what is it in the personal care products that we're using. And I had this natural aversion to anything that isn't really organic, holistic, or very, very natural.
Did you have any interest in that at all before you got pregnant? Or were you kind of just like everyone else? It's like, okay, I just picked the moisturizer that's got some good reviews. I picked the sunscreen that's got some good reviews. Or did you have any insight into that before?
No, zero, really. Just exactly like you say, I was just a regular consumer.
So you get pregnant, you become conscious about everything. You start looking at organic and the holistic stuff. What does that journey look like? Because it's difficult because when you get to that stage in interest, you're almost looking at the holistic and the organic stuff. You're aware that there are some better and more natural materials, but then there's question marks of, is this as effective? Is this as good as what they say it is? And realistically, what's the big difference between the two? So what did some of your research and your personal research, I guess, your personal application look like in terms of you discovering what the difference was between these products?
So it all really started with this holistic conference that I was watching on YouTube. And this environmental medicine specialist opened her talk with a statement that the skin is our largest organ. And I'm sure I've known about this before, but somehow at that stage it made such an impact on me. And basically the whole topic of her conversation was the toxicity of the mother that comes through personal care products. So everything that can be found in the fetal cord blood samples, in amniotic fluid, in the placenta. And that really shocked me because I never before considered how what I put on my skin can end up, in baby's amniotic fluid. So that was really the journey. And from that talk, I literally ditched everything that was not natural and holistic and organic. So it was a very quick kind of progress.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and with that being said, did she mention how important it was not only about the things that we put on our skin, but also the things that we ingest as well? Was there a kind of a differentiator between how important both of those are, or did they just look at it as kind of just as important as each other? But we are obviously more aware that if we eat unhealthy food, it's probably going to have an impact on us and our children. But when we put things on our skin, it kind of doesn't register in the same way.
Yeah, so the whole context was about toxicity of the mother. So that comes from, inhaling also fragrances and from things that we ingest and from things that we put on our skin. So overall, everything that ends up in tissues, in our organs, in, breast tissue, breast milk, etc.
Yeah, and what stage of your pregnancy did you find that out? Was it still pretty early days?
Yeah, it was super early. That was probably the first 6 weeks or so.
Oh, amazing. So you caught it nice and early then as well. Do you ever think about what it could have been like if you hadn't come across that seminar or you hadn't started taking action?
I think I had this drive towards natural because I really wanted to have a home birth as well. So there were other aspects that were guiding me towards, moving away from conventional into more holistic, natural, etc. So I think it would have been a matter of time, but I just feel like it was very lucky kind of path.
Amazing. And what steps did you then take thereafter? Obviously, the one that we're going to center our attention around today is going to be big on sun protection and everything along those lines. But what did you do thereafter in terms of replacing those things? Obviously, it's well and good chucking those things out the door and out the window. But at the same time, you need to start to think about how we bring those back into our repertoire and routine? Maybe some of the things you might have seen as non-essential, but there's probably many things that you thought, well, actually, no, I do want these things in my life. They are important. So where did you go about replacing those things thereafter?
Yeah, so in general, I was, always a kind of skincare minimalist. I didn't use many products. I also didn't like a lot of cleaning products. So I still, like to use baking soda and vinegar and just really, really simple things. And so it was a matter of really removing anything that, isn't supernatural. So instead of body lotion, which I used to love, I started using coconut oil, for example. So it's super easy replacement. But what became difficult is when, it started getting hot and I started wondering like, okay, what can I use instead of sunscreen? And that's when I started looking into it. And I ended up finding this, image on Pinterest with different pictures of different plants, so raspberry, carrot, wheat germ, and estimated SPF of the oils that come from them. And that really interested me, and I decided to buy 3 different oils from a brand called Fushi. So it was raspberry seed oil, carrot almond blend, and wheat germ oil. And I started testing them on myself. So I'll put one on one shoulder, the other one on another shoulder, another one on my face, see how they feel, but also what happens when I'm in the sun. And so they seem to work, do the job. And then I was always wondering like if there's a more effective way for me to test their efficacy, of these oils. So one day when my ex-partner was making a sandwich, we had a renovation in the house and there was a roll of paper tape next to him. And it was a beautiful May day, so he wasn't wearing a shirt. And I looked at his back and I looked at the tape, and this idea struck me to put tape on his back to create a grid and to use the different oils that I've been using in different sections and to ask him to sit in the sun. And so after 1 hour, when I took the tape, you could clearly see how photoprotective some of these oils are. And I posted the picture and it went viral. It was seen by 4.5 million people in 4 days. And that was the beginning of my new life.
Oh, wow. That is impressive. And a really good idea as well. It's a nice way to just see it so transparently. So what were some of the results? I'm sure that on that photo, I've not actually seen it, one of the 4.4 million who haven't. And I should imagine there was probably labels of like, this was the raspberry oil, this was the almond and carrot oil, for example.
So what I did, I created 6 sections that were separated with tape. And each one had different oil. On the top left, I had carrot almond blend, and below raspberry seed oil. And then next to them on top, there was 2 different wheat germ oils. There was organic and non-organic one. The bottom middle was nothing, and then the bottom right was coconut. And so the raspberry and carrot almond blend had no color change whatsoever. So they worked exactly like sunscreen. There was no redness. There was no change in color. It was just a natural skin. There was a difference between wheat germ and organic wheat germ. So the organic ones seemed to be more photoprotective. And the section without anything was sunburned. And then the section with coconut oil was even more burnt, which was a little bit interesting for me.
Just after you started putting it all over your skin as a moisturizer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's interesting how those things can have a benefit in some way that we realize, and then other downstream effects that we might not as well. So as we're on the topic of sun, I think that this is always something that's quite controversial. I think that the obvious routine and rituals to go grab the SPF, whatever it is, in the supermarket, right? If we're more aware, then we might be like, okay, let's go for SPF 50, especially if we're more prone to being burnt. If we care less, and even when I was a child and I wanted a bit more of a tan, I would be like, okay, let me look for SPF 8, let me look for oil and things like that are going to bring the sun onto me. I'm only in the sun for 7 days on a holiday, so let me make the most of it. And I think that a lot of people are kind of on those two extremes. And, then if the SPF 30 is cheap, then someone will pick up that as well, right? So that's kind of the normal thing. You don't find but then also at the same time, you also see these photos on Instagram and everything along those lines, maybe a little bit like the one that you posted saying, okay, well, people years ago didn't use sunscreen. They spent all this time out in the sun and they were super healthy and everything along those lines. Is it really the sun that's the problem, or is it the chemicals that we're putting on their skin? So there's kind of this conflicting arguments of what we should do. And maybe those are not even the right ones. It's not super pro sunscreen or super pro anti-sunscreen. There's somewhere in the middle. So can you talk to us a little bit about what we're getting wrong about protection of our skin in the sun?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that really struck me once I got into this research, Because what followed after I posted the picture, there was so many questions and comments that actually had me very interested in wanting to know the answers. So first thing I wanted to know is like, what is it in those oils that makes them behave like sunscreen? So I ended up going into basically the quantum physics and mechanics to understand the principles of absorption spectra by these molecules, you know. But I think what really struck me as something that we don't understand is that our skin has these built-in defenses, and because it is an organ, just like we can optimize our gut health with pre and probiotics, or we can optimize our brain function with nootropics, we can also do the same for the skin. So it's not that, you know, your skin is, you have this, let's say, type 2 skin type, and you're prone to burning, and this is the way it is for your life. There's a lot you can do to help your skin. And that was the huge discovery for me, and something that I couldn't understand why it's hidden in academia. Like, there were literally 6 years of studies that were progressively showing more and more of this reality of how skin really protects itself from sun damage. And it's something that nobody talks about and nobody knows.
Yeah, it's insane. It really, really is. So let's now take the typical person who's heading to a day on the beach. They've probably done their skincare routine in the morning. They've put on all of their different face products, their moisturizer, if they're that extensive for their skin routine, because many people aren't, including myself in the past. So I get the fact that a lot of people might just literally just go to the beach and put on their sunscreen, and maybe they've used moisturizer in the morning, or maybe they haven't. What is it about that routine that could be unfavorable for them when it comes to their exposure to the sun, especially considering that most people, when they head out to the beach or head out to go for a swim or go for a tan, they're usually there for an extended period of time. They're not just there for 30 minutes and then they're out. They're usually there for a good day or so. So what is it about that routine that might not be so advantageous for us?
Yeah, so exactly what you said. You can think about a person that, for example, lives in a very indoor life, and then ventures out to the beach for a whole day with skin that is really not ready to meet the sun at this level. So what through my practice of natural sun protection, but also photoadaptation. And so photoadaptation is basically a process by which it's like a process of hormesis. So small amount of stress over extended period of time increase resilience to the stressful situation. So in one study, just exposure of our skin to sunlight 3 times a week, starting from 7 to 12 minutes in the first 3 days, and then extending it to 30 minutes at week 3 can increase our skin's resilience to sunburn by 400%. So this doesn't require a product. It doesn't require anything other than exposing our skin to sun regularly. So that's first thing that we're kind of getting wrong. Second thing is that we don't understand how diet not only can make our skin more photosensitive, and also how it can make it less sensitive to sunburn. So a lot of people in this field who are interested into natural sun protection know about the role of seed oils in making our skin more sensitive to sunburn. But maybe the concept isn't really fully understood. What we call seed oils are basically industrial oils that are made of one of the hateful 8. So it's a soybean, it's canola, rapeseed, sunflower, etc. And the process of producing these oils is very extensive. There's a lot of steps, there's a lot of chemicals involved. And in the end, we have this very clear oil that is packed into plastic container and is exposed to light in a shop and then probably in our kitchens and so on. And so these oils are mostly polyunsaturated fatty acids. And because of their structure with many single double bonds, alternating double bonds, they are very prone to oxidation. So what makes fat prone to oxidation or not, or resistant to oxidation, is the structure of the chain. And saturated fats have no double bonds, so there is no sites of where oxygen can attach and cause damage. Monosaturated fats have one double bond, so they're also very stable, but also can be oxidized. And polyunsaturated fats have multiple double bonds. And so that's what makes them really unstable. And so what we know from science is that when we increase the consumption of these oils, especially omega-6 fatty acids, they start to change the composition of our adipose tissue. And so accumulation of these pro-oxidant fatty acids, these polyunsaturated fatty acids in adipose tissues, causes chronic inflammation that literally depletes our vitamin E and the whole antioxidant network of the blood and our skin, because they're related. Then the next kind of step in this is once these polyunsaturated fatty acids are incorporated into our cellular membranes. And remember, we are a bag of 70 trillion cells, wrapped in the skin. Then each one of these cellular membranes has higher level of these polyunsaturated fats. So our cells are more exposed to oxidation because they degrade so much easier than saturated fats. And so when it comes to skin cells, our skin becomes then really sensitive to sun damage, because polyunsaturated fats are really the first ones to go when exposed to UV radiation, to the energy of UV radiation. So then we have, peroxidation of lipids, and that causes the whole chain reaction that actually causes the sunburn to come much faster than it possibly could.
Yeah, it's fascinating, because most people's protocol is to go from having literally no sun at all to going 7 days on end with 8 hours plus of sun exposure.
Exactly.
Plus, when people go on holiday and everything along those lines, they're hardly eating the healthiest, and maybe they weren't even eating healthy to begin with. So then you have all of these, and that's the thing you said, they're probably in our kitchen. And obviously a lot of us are used to seeing those plastic bottles with the clear oils in, but they're also in the foods that are generally made by most restaurants, especially when you go down the economic chain and there's a little bit of food that's not necessarily expensive, then you're probably going to see more of that exposure as well. So you're basically doing everything possible to increase your chances of sunburn as well by being in that position. Any other things that come to your mind that are that impactful? So it's going to be a lot of the dietary aspects, but then also the exposure. Is there anything else in terms of what we put on our skin as well? Are we doing ourselves a disservice by choosing a certain brand or choosing certain chemicals?
Yeah, so this is such a deep conversation, because we can also think about, the effect of the clothing we wear and the dyes in them and so on. But the whole point is that our bodies and our skin are exposed to increased amount of chemicals. And so what is really important is that the antioxidant status of our bodies, which is then reflected in the antioxidant network of our skin, has to be maintained really high, because everything is being affected, So yes, our diet affects how our skin can deal with the sunburn, and everything that we surround ourselves with, fragrances and products that we use to wash our clothes in and all of that.
Yeah, it's huge. It's a enormous rabbit hole, but I think it's interesting to go down as well. And talk to me about maybe what we put on our skin in the process as well. You mentioned fragrance. I think it's not necessarily the first thing we do in the morning when we go out to the beach, but we might put fragrance on, or we might find ourselves in the sun a little bit later and put our fragrance on in the morning. We put deodorant on, we put moisturizer on, we put our face creams on. Are those things not so beneficial? Because I think that there's also this, I'm not sure if it's a myth or if it's the truth, but when you put anything like citric on your body, and maybe you're cutting lemons or something along those lines, you keep the residue on your fingers and then you go out in the sun. What are we doing in terms of that sense that potentially end up leading us to a bad position with the sun, with the things that we put on our skin as well?
Yeah, so you mentioned lemons, and there's a class of phytochemicals that are produced by a family of citrus family, and parsley as well, and fig. And they produce this chemical called psoralen. And psoralen has this affinity for attaching itself to the DNA. So it can penetrate our skin. It will attach itself to DNA, and once it's exposed to sunlight, it basically causes these breaks in our DNA, which basically contribute to a lot of DNA damage that then is reflected in this really severe sunburn. So there's some people call it the margarita burn, like you said, maybe some barmaids, making margaritas and then going out in the sun and having these, huge blisters, blistered covered hands. Yeah. So that's definitely one thing that makes our skin more sensitive as well.
Yeah, definitely. So something to avoid. So let's talk about Sylvia's optimized tanning routine or on holiday routine. I assume we avoid all the things that you just mentioned. That's obviously going to be a big aspect, but talk to us about how you would prepare personally. Obviously, let's say we've done the 3 weeks of building our sun exposure. We've gone from our 7 to 12 minutes all the way up to so many hours per day. So we're kind of ready or thereabouts. Or maybe we're someone who lives in a sunny place as well. I think that's the big challenge with, and that's another question I would like to ask as well. If you are coming from somewhere that doesn't have a lot of sun, is it advantageous to do like a sunbed preparation, or is that just not a good idea?
I think about the times where, I've been in Europe and then flying to the Caribbean to join a boat that I was working on. And, the transition of going from the winter light and pale skin to the Caribbean, it's a shock to the system. So I actually never thought about, going to sunbeds to kind of help my skin deal with the light, but definitely I will take it very, very slowly. So regular exposure is very, very important. And one of the most important aspects in protecting our skin is really being exposed regularly to the sun regularly. And because paradoxically, it is, if you burn easily, it's not because you have too little sun. You need to be exposed to the sun regularly, because what science also shows is that vitamin D is also photoprotective. And so when it's produced in our skin, it produces a lot of different isomers and different kind of versions of itself, that some of them actually end up on top of our skin as well. So they go into sweat glands and sebum, and, they protect our skin from the top down. And obviously vitamin D is also very important in our skin's immune system. And that also means dealing with sun damage, protecting our DNA, repairing DNA, etc. But I think the most important thing to understand is it's really how diet affects our skin's ability to repair itself. And that's the aspect that I really would love people to understand, so they can start practicing it, more regularly and making it easier for their skin.
Yeah, absolutely. So run us through the optimized Sylvia protocol when it comes to sun. I'd love to hear this, so go for it extensively for us.
So definitely regular sun exposure is the top priority. Ideally, you want to be in the sun even before the UVB is at its peak. So early morning exposure when there's a lot of red light, because red light is very anti-inflammatory. And because of its wavelength function, it can actually penetrate the skin at a very deep level. So even like a few centimeters into our tissue. So what it does is it basically helps the skin prepare itself for the sun exposure with its anti-inflammatory and healing actions, etc. So that's number one, to be in the sun, regularly. Second is that...
I don't want to interrupt so early, but I know that people in the UK are going to be screaming out to me and be like, Elliot, where do you expect me to find the sun? Sylvia's talking about this as if it comes and visits us on a regular basis. And us in the UK, we usually get good 4 months of sun. And then the remainder of the time, it's very, very minimal. And when it does come out, it might only be for 2 hours during the day. So we have to run out and chase it. So if you are living in a place where we don't get an enormous amount of sun exposure, is there any way we can get around that?
Do you know, I think we had an interview recently with Dr. Martin Moore.
Yep.
About the light doctor. And I think he talks about it as well, that, even on the cloudiest day, the amount of lumens that come from the outdoors, it's so many thousand times higher than any indoor lighting. And obviously this is the lighting that our bodies are biologically programmed to respond to. So a lot of our functions are controlled by exposure to these lights, to this light. So it really doesn't matter. We evolved to live in the environment that we live in. And I know it can be more difficult for people of darker complexion to get enough vitamin D and so on in sun exposure. But yeah, any sun exposure it's really important. Also for our eyes, for the brain, for the skin.
Yeah, it's a good point. Don't underestimate that the sun is still behind the clouds. There's still a lot of UV coming on us. There's a lot of lux, if I'm not mistaken, coming on us, even though the sun isn't necessarily shining as well. And sorry, just before we move on from that comment, does it help if we are a little bit more exposed? I know that obviously there's the temptation to wrap up and not have any skin on show, but would that kind of defeat the object if we're spending time outside? But the only thing that you've got a scarf around our face, but the only thing we can is getting sun exposure is our eyes.
Well, when it's cold, you have to wrap up, But yes, the eyes are super important because, I mean, for even circadian regulation, the eyes are the key, really.
Okay, perfect. So we can stay wrapped up. Let's continue with this routine.
Exactly. So then the second thing that I do, and I do it all year round now, is I take 3 supplements. One of them is astaxanthin. This is the name that I'm sure if you've never heard of it, you've been exposed to or seen or understand. So astaxanthin is produced by microalgae, and this microalgae lives in areas of extreme temperature and variations, and often is desiccated in area, let's say, bird baths or areas where water disappears periodically. So when it's exposed to a lot of sun and it's devoid of nutrients, it starts to protect itself, producing this very red carotenoid. It's a fat-soluble carotenoid. And it's an incredible molecule, and one of its incredible powers is that it's built exactly like our cellular membranes. So our cellular membranes have polar ends and non-polar middle. And the only way for any antioxidant like beta-carotene or vitamin E to be able to protect our cellular membranes is to insert itself in some ways to the cellular membrane. And so astaxanthin is very unique because it can span, because of the structure, which is identical to cellular membranes, so polar ends, non-polar middle, it can go through, it can pierce itself through the whole membrane, and so it protects the cell from the inside and from the outside. Astaxanthin is incredible at absorbing UVB radiation specifically, and in one study of, I think, 23 individuals taking astaxanthin for 9 weeks, this is a small dose, only 4 milligram capsules. At the end of, so what they've done is they measured the minimum erythema dose, which is the minimal dose of UV light that causes redness. So they've measured this at the beginning of experiment. And after 9 weeks of supplementing, and they found also this 400% increase in skin's resilience to sunburn. So this is very small dose. I take 12 milligram capsules. So astaxanthin has affinity for mitochondrial membranes, and mitochondrial stress, because mitochondria produce a lot of free radicals because of their function already. It's incredible support for the skin when we consume astaxanthin, because then our mitochondria are protected from this increased oxidative stress. And so the cellular membranes are also protected. So the lipids are protected. And, you know, when you protect the lipids from peroxidation, this is a big part of the protection of sun damage. So the second supplement is pycnogenol. It's an extract from French maritime pine bark. It's patented in Switzerland. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of studies on its effects on the whole body. My focus was on learning what it does for the skin, and the unique feature of this molecule is that it has affinity for collagen. So because of its structure, it kind of likes to be around collagen fibers. And what it does is, even it metabolites. So we consume pycnogenol, then our bodies break it down into other smaller molecules. But even the metabolites, even the smaller parts of pycnogenol, also have affinity for collagen. And what they do is they limit the function of MMPs. MMPs are matrix metalloproteinases. They're enzymes that are ramped up. They're produced in response to UV exposure. And basically they break down collagen and elastin fibers. So pycnogenol protects collagen from degradation by UV exposure by attaching itself to it and protecting it. And then the third supplement is it's something called fern block, but it's extract from Polypodium leucotomo. It's a fern, type of fern. It's also patented. It's very well studied. It can be taken orally as well, but it also exists as some sunscreens have it as an additive. And it's very interesting because in case of carotenoids, for example, you have to take carotenoids for a number of weeks, maybe 5 or 6 weeks, before you can find measurable effect of carotenoids in protecting the skin from sun damage. But in one of the studies, taking pycnogenol, just taking fern block, they could measure the effect within 2 or 3 hours. So it's not fat soluble, it's water soluble, which perhaps makes it easier for the body to transport and accumulate. But yeah, this is another extract I'm taking. This one helps also with melasma and other problems related to sun damage. So these are the 3 things I take every day. Also, during the summer, I take increased doses of vitamin C, because what I've learned from all the science is the importance of synergy between different phytochemicals. So it's not just about taking one thing and a lot of it. It's about all these molecules helping each other, supporting each other, and so on, recycling as well. So vitamin C is very important for vitamin E because it helps to recycle vitamin E once it becomes oxidized. So that's my routine. So regular sun exposure, these 3 supplements, which I take every day. And yeah, one thing I've also learned is that what is interesting to learn about concept of systemic photoprotection. So systemic as in the whole body protection via diet. But systemic photoprotection also includes topical protection. And the way that body does it is when we consume these phytochemicals that are photoprotective by nature, our bodies distribute them in our tissue, and it's a dynamic process. So the tissues that are the most exposed to sun, so the forehead, nose, top of our shoulders, will have higher concentrations of these beneficial compounds. Basically, when they're depleted, so for example, if you use alcohol wipes, alcohol will deplete amount of carotenoids from the skin surface. And the way it's repleted, it basically goes from the top down. So this can be measured, it can be observed in studies. And the way this happens is that our sebum and sweat glands will contain small amount of these carotenoids, flavonoids, polyphenols, and they're expressed up to the skin surface with sweat and sebum, and then they go down to replete the amount. So this is the process that happens naturally. And so because this is how we're designed to work, we can also do it on purpose. So what I like to do is I have some kind of favorite oil, let's say jojoba or some other oil, and I would empty one 12 milligram capsule of astaxanthin into, let's say, 200 milligrams of wheat germ or raspberry seed oil. And I use that on my body, let's say 2 times a week. So single application can increase the amount of these phytochemicals in the skin by 10 to 40 times over the baseline in one application. And that amount doesn't get depleted for another 10 to 12 days. So there's a cumulative effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested now, obviously, with all this being done, I would imagine that when you head off to an extended period of sun, you don't really need to put too much on your skin. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, I mean, right now I don't even put anything on my skin. I just know that what I take and my regular routine. So this is what we also getting wrong in sun protection. We are trained to use sunscreen right before we go out in the sun. But what I found through science is the ways our bodies work is that the sun protection is continuous process. It's dynamic. Things are distributed all the time. So let's say it's cold and I have my shoulders covered. There's no need for a lot of carotenoids and other phytochemicals to be in the skin. But once I start to expose myself, so there's more sun exposure, my body will start to distribute these phytochemicals to account for that. And so when you use these phytochemicals, let's say oil with astaxanthin and so on, as part of your skincare routine, then you have this cumulative effect, which means your skin is always ready. You're full of this good stuff in it, and you don't have to use sunscreen there and then because it's already here.
And that's where I think people get it wrong, is that they go on the camp of pro sunscreen or anti-sunscreen. And the challenge is they haven't done all these things in advance. And then they go anti-sunscreen and then they expose themselves and they get sunburnt within minutes, right? And I think that tends to be the problem, is that people think it's like I'm for this or I'm against this and I'm going to chuck this out the window. Would you say if someone isn't doing all the things that you are doing, are they safer to put on sunscreen than not? Because I think a lot of people will be like, this is a nice idea, but I don't know how practical it would be for people on a day-to-day basis.
On a day-to-day, just wear a shirt, really. If you don't want to use sunscreen, take small amount of sun and learn the language of your skin tone. It's very simple. I mean, the body is so quick in telling us when we've had enough sun. So I think the problem with sunscreen is that, we forget how to read our body and we don't read the signals anymore. But once you stop using it, you become much more self-aware. It's like, okay, I'm not using sunscreen. My shoulder is getting warm. I'm going to put a shirt on. So I always have a hat I always have a shirt if I go to the beach. I avoid the midday hours. But I have to say, I do also practice like sun exposure on purpose to ramp up my vitamin D. And I do it midday. Right now, my skin doesn't even change color anymore. I can go, I live in Spain, even UV index 8 or 9. I can safely be in the sun for an hour, and like completely naked, and my body won't even change color. It's like I'm just ready for this environment. But after 1 hour, like if I feel like I'm getting warm or my skin is, looking like it's under stress, I just, get off the sun and put a shirt on.
And we haven't spoken about that at all, but what are the risks of too much sun exposure? We've obviously just spoken about more of the superficial aesthetic side of things, but we haven't spoken about the aspect of skin cancer and things later down the line as well. So what can too much sun exposure, especially when we're not putting ourselves in the prime conditions of not often being in the sun, consuming a bunch of oils, not supplementing properly, obviously then, long times out in the sun as well. What can that lead to downstream?
The topic of skin cancer is something I'm still studying, and I don't have like a full clarity on where I stand. I know on one hand that I'm in a camp of cancer being mitochondrial disease. So I'm with Dr. Seyfried in here. But there are studies to show the pretty definite evidence that melanoma is associated with frequent sunburns. So sunburns are something definitely to avoid. Yes. So while sun exposure is definitely good and has a lot of health benefits for the whole body, sunburns are not good for anyone, especially sunburns at a very early age. But in terms of like squamous cell carcinoma or basal cell carcinoma, I don't really go into very much detail on this. The only thing I know for certain is one of the key studies that looked at the effect of sun on causing skin cancer was done in mice. It's the Black and Chan study, where a group of mice was fed exactly the same diet. It was exposed to UV radiation for 22 weeks. And one of the groups, outside of the standard lab diet, also received a mixture of antioxidants. And so it was very visible, and the pictures on my Instagram, you can see it, that the group that didn't receive the antioxidants had really huge tumors. So the amount of tumors, the mass of them was much greater comparing to the group that received antioxidants. So again, this really shows how vital these phytochemicals are. And when I say phytochemicals as well, it's basically a name for these defense molecules that are produced by plants. And they're not structural in any way. Their role is very specific. So they either capture light and release it as heat, so they provide this sunscreening effect, or they turn on and upregulate and downregulate different functions in our bodies. So they can make our skin more resilient. They can turn on genes that help with detoxification or with DNA repair and protection from damage, etc., etc. So they're really vital. One thing I can add as well is what I found as well interesting is that across all the studies that were looking at skin cancer, they also found consistently that areas of skin cancer were depleted in antioxidants. So just like in animals, the antioxidants are vital in protecting from damage. It also shows, in human studies that the sites of cancerous cells, the antioxidants in the skin are depleted. That's
really good to know as well. And coming on to after sun practices as well, is there anything we should be doing in particular? I think obviously, a big thing that's well known is to put on like aloe vera gel. Like that's a very popular one. Would that help? Do other things like that help when we've had a decent amount of sun exposure, maybe a little bit too much?
Yeah, so too much happens. And I also looked into studies that show the most effective ways of dealing with sunburn. And one of them is actually by applying aloe vera, as you mentioned already. And the healing effect of aloe vera counts for any kind of burn. So for chemical burns, for radiation burns, and for physical burns. So it's really it's amazing if you can get hold of it, or if you can grow it on your windowsill or in a garden. That would be fantastic. I've definitely used aloe vera when I've overstayed my good time on the beach or something, and it's incredible how it helps. It's incredible. It's the effect is almost instantaneous. And so what is what anyone can do, and that is super helpful, is either buy pure aloe vera juice and freeze it into ice cubes. And this can also be mixed with green tea, because green tea can be, you can help with after sun exposure with green tea before, during, or after sun exposure. You can apply it topically, but you can also take it orally, and it's effective in every case because of the catechins action on dealing with sun damage. So you can just brew strong green tea, mix it with aloe vera juice, freeze it into ice cubes, and you can use it as part of your skincare routine. So basically you can put it on your face as a part of like a, cryotherapy, or you can just use it as after sun, and it's always there, it's always fresh, and it's always available. Second thing is black tea. So if you are sunburned, you can use very strong black tea. You can basically brew some super strong black tea. And I know Britain is great for drinking, like Yorkshire or something, or PG Tips. Make some of those, dip some kind of cloth in it and apply it on your body and keep it for as long as you can. And a third thing is milk. So sour milk, kefir, yogurt. It's really good at decreasing sun damage, helping the cells in regeneration, reducing inflammation, and reducing peeling and, all the other downstream negative effects.
Very, very good to know. Thank you for sharing. And I was curious about the aloe, and it's nice that the aloe vera actually has the impact that a lot of people think it has as well. And it's probably one of the easiest. Obviously, the tea is very easy as well, but it's good to add those to our repertoire as well. And then the final question I do have, I appreciate that this might be quite an extensive one, but I want to make sure we touch on it before we go. The difference between adults and babies and children, I can imagine, is pretty damn big. So I'm curious to get your take on how we look to protect children from the sun versus how we look to protect ourselves as adults from the sun.
Yeah, so baby's skin, first of all, the skin barrier isn't fully formed until children are about the age of 2 or so. So they absorb a lot of what's being put on the skin. Obviously, baby skin is usually very sensitive and delicate. So, but still, sun exposure is also vital for children. So I would say take your babies out early mornings so they're exposed to sunlight, but for a short period of time, and just cover up. You really don't have to use any chemicals. For my daughter, I use raspberry seed oil. Right now she's 8, so she gets 4 milligrams of astaxanthin every day. Her skin is incredible. And I don't know if this is, like, her dad is from Netherlands. His skin is lighter than mine. So he's like a type 2 skin. I'm maybe 3. My daughter is darker than me. She looks like Spanish children here when she's, in the sun. So I don't know if this was like my body responding to this sun exposure, because I was pregnant. I got pregnant in December, and, there was a lot of sun exposure through March, April, May until she was born in September. I was a lot in the sun. So I don't know if this is like the epigenetic factor, body sensing, okay, I'm in increased sun exposure area, let's give this girl more melanin. I'm not sure what it is.
Maybe.
But
yeah.
She's so resilient. I've never used sunscreen on her body. She's got beautiful olive skin, never burns. She is very well trained on not allowing anybody to put chemicals on her. So she just says, we eat our sunscreen. We don't put chemicals. So I would say for any parent, this would be the key, to regular sun exposure again, but also to use oils with carotenoids. So could be a mixture of, let's say, sea buckthorn oil with almond oil and carrot oil, and just use it on the baby as part of the baby skincare routine, because the oils will keep the skin really supple. They penetrate really deeply, so you can really help the body's skin, be more resilient as well very easily.
Amazing. Well, Sylvia, I think this is a super fascinating conversation, and we packed a lot in when there was probably a lot more that we could pack as well. And I want to ask you.
I can talk for days.
Yeah, exactly. You piqued my curiosity now as well. Mm-hmm. But with that being said, I got 2 final questions for you. And the first is, what impact do you want to have on the world with the work that you do?
Oh, thank you for asking this, because I feel such a great sense of mission, And one of the first things that I started feeling when I came across all this science, because like I said, it's 60 years of science, that gradually show more and more of the role of these plant phytochemicals in our skin's defense system, is that I couldn't believe why isn't it public knowledge. And I felt like, I was like, why don't people know about it? Why don't doctors talk about it? It bugged me a lot. And then as I started understanding it more and as I was able to explain it more to more people, it just became such a huge kind of mission of mine to actually bring this knowledge to public, because I know a lot of people are looking for it and there aren't very easy sources to find, to piece it all together. So for me, it took 6 years of really relentless study and, obsessive research and reading papers to understand it from all the different perspectives and to put it together into what I feel, what I know now, what I can offer. But yeah, this is my mission really. I would love everybody to know, at least to know, and then they can choose whatever they want to believe.
Exactly. The awareness piece is the key, and giving people the information, then what they do with it thereafter is their prerogative and their choice. But at the end of the day, it's about giving them that information to make an informed choice in the first place. So I'm glad that we've done a lot of that today. And where's the best place for people to find you if they want to keep up with the work that you're doing, Sylvia?
I actually created a skincare brand and photoprotective serum that works with our skin. So my brand is called Earthchild, and one place to reach me is on my website, earthchild.co. You can also find me on Instagram with the same name, earthchild.co. And that's probably the best place. And I also want to encourage anyone who has any questions. No question is stupid, really. I love any question. If you have any questions, what you can do, how things work, if there's anything I can explain or help you to move from chemical to natural sun protection, please ask. Because this is the fuel for me. This is what really drives my passion and drives my interest. And this is the service I want to offer to the world and to anyone interested.
Amazing. We'll make sure that those are in the show notes below. But Sylvia, thank you so much for your time today. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure, Elliot.